Welcome to Subscription Prescription, the podcast where you get the information you need to scale your subscription program.
Okay, before we dive into today's dose, I first want to talk to you about loyalty. One of the problems is that there are so many different apps out there that are all doing much of the same thing, which is just offering loyalty point programs to your customers and your subscribers. And the problem with that is it's really hard to tell how engaging that is for people, if it's really motivating or inspiring them to buy more from you and creating a closer attachment to your brand. That's why I want to introduce you to Upzello. Upzello has sponsored our podcast and newsletter in the past. They're actually implementing a new program related to loyalty. It's a loyalty, referrals, and rewards platform specially designed for online and retail stores. They're rolling out features quickly, and what they're allowing you to do is build loyalty and referral programs that deliver for both your subscriptions and your one-time customers. More gamification, more engagement, the types of rewards and the usage that somebody would expect to make things really easy from a loyalty program. So if you're looking for ways to create a loyalty or referral program that speaks to your customers, ones that they're actually going to use, and one that will actually drive revenue for your business, I highly suggest looking up upzello.com and checking out what they offer. Welcome to another dose of Subscription Prescription, the podcast where we try to help you figure out everything related to D2C subscriptions. I'm really excited to be joined on today's dose by a good friend and very, very smart guy, Ben Fisher. Ben is the founder of multiple different companies, including Carthook, Rodeo, and now Cruise Control. He's a fractional CTO. And in case anybody is watching video, you'll see that we could be twins if he either wore glasses or I had a hat on at this point. So anyway, Ben, I'm so glad you could come on, man. It's a long time coming, but thank you for coming on.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I was going to say, maybe I should, in honor of you, take off my hat and see if I can find my glasses somewhere. Although I did catch myself squinting today. And I was like, really? For my 39th birthday, this is what God has given me, is I now might need to get glasses. So yeah, we might be continuing to intersect,
get closer in our style. I love it. So for some context, Ben and I first met going on his podcast, which I feel like might have been 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, something like that. And then we've connected at some conferences, and just recently we're able to hang out at a Shop Talk and Expo West together. And one of the biggest reasons when I wanted to bring you on is because I feel like we get a lot on the show. We either have solution experts, like SEO or email or finance, or we talk to a brand, or it's me pontificating about what people should or shouldn't be doing. But you are kind of like the first CTO, very technical minded person we've had on the show. And so I'm really excited. One, I'd like to hear from you a little bit more about your background so people can get a little bit more context and where your expertise comes from. But that's kind of where I'm excited to get into and help people understand the complexity of tech, especially on Shopify. There are so many apps available. There's so much marketing involved and positioning involved. But as we have both talked offline a ton, what they say you need and what you actually need are not always the same thing. But yeah, so please tell listeners and everyone a little bit more about your background.
Sure. So my background, I'm a designer and a programmer. And I kind of say tongue in cheek that I'm an okay programmer and an okay designer. I'm not particularly remarkable at either, but I think part of what has been a part of my journey is, like, I love making stuff. I love building things. And I think, for me and frankly, like, as an entrepreneur, I think what has has gone really well is the fact that I do balance both of those skills, and I am like really experienced at both. But again, like, oftentimes what will happen is that, so I can speak engineering and I can build a lot of the solutions, but a part of my strategy in general is I'll often build like initial proof of concepts, and I can understand things architecturally. I will hire and like build out a team to really fill in a lot of like specific expertise and gaps. Which is what you see oftentimes, especially when dealing with like scalability challenges and building things for like larger brands. I've been in the Shopify space for probably about like 11 or 12 years. Shopify was actually at the time just one of our integrations for my previous company, CartHook. We had started off, I think, in Volusion, and our product CartHook was a tool that helped recover abandoned shopping carts. It was funny is I always had to clarify to like typically older friends, like, no, these are not physical shopping carts. Like I went an entire conversation once with a mentor of mine, and it wasn't until like at the end of our dinner, like, so we talked for like an hour, and he was a creative director at Ogilvy, was giving me all these ideas, and I like some of his ideas didn't really make entirely good sense, but it wasn't until like literally like an hour later that when we were texting, it became clear he thought I was recovering physical abandoned
It's like
shopping
you're like,
carts
hey, I have
at
this
like
plan. I'm going to go to grocery stores across the country and help them get
basically
their shopping carts back in faster.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was obviously a bit of a detour on talking about my background,
Awesome.
but it just came to me. So
That's really funny.
we Shopify was one of our integrations, and this is pre-IPO. This is probably around like 2000 and probably like 15, 16, maybe earlier. But we saw this sort of this enormous growth around and energy around the Shopify space. At the time, Shopify was really sort of perceived as we'll call it like down market, smaller stores, not enterprise at all. And over the last like 10 years, they've really sort of taken up a lot of like continue to move upstream, and so you have a lot of mid-market and then now enterprise brands that are going onto it. We're certainly testing the waters, and with that, a lot of the products that I've been building have been focused on that like mid and upper mid market. So typically, like with CartHook, we built a like one-page checkout, and we introduced this idea that has been around forever with info marketers, which is post-purchase upsells. ClickFunnels has been doing it forever, and like Russell Brunson. And so we took that model, and no one was doing it at the time for e-commerce. And Shopify didn't have any of the sort of native APIs that they have today. And that was what we enabled, that sort of new sales strategy that was so critical for brands who were doing like Facebook ads. Because what would happen is it was really difficult, and it's still today, it's really difficult for smaller brands to compete with Amazons and larger brands without like, they'll have a hero product, but the only way that they can typically afford to acquire customers is through some sort of like driving incremental revenue, ideally same day acquisition. And so post-purchase upsells are just like a really straightforward and like effective strategy where you sell your basically you advertise your hero product, and then after the person's completed the purchase, like you don't get in the way of their initial purchase, because the whole point is just let them buy what they're already excited to buy, then essentially hold their cart on file and present them additional products that go with their first purchase. And it was something around like 15% of people will accept an upsell. And so overall, it's a really, I mean, it completely changes. It makes a unsustainable business sustainable or profitable for a lot of these companies. So after selling CartHook, I was a fractional CTO, and then launched Rodeo, which was one of the first native subscription apps that was built upon Shopify's newly introduced native APIs, which was about 3 years ago. So we were one of the first subscription apps in the Shopify App Store. Which, so as I'm talking, I feel a little bit like a grandpa, where I'm like back in the olden days in Shopify, like. But there is like an interesting sort of like historical perspective to all this, which is like
really is.
a lot has happened, and there's a lot of new people in like we'll call it like the subscription world today. There's been a lot of, I would say, like more like sophistication around like sales strategies around subscription, but there's also some really important like historical context around like why subscriptions are sort of sold the way that they are today on Shopify, and how subscriptions on Shopify are like basically how that model is similar and different to selling subscriptions on other e-commerce platforms, or even like on completely custom platforms, because there is still like a pretty broad nuance between like with Shopify, it's gotten a bit more nuanced and sophisticated around like the types of subscriptions that you'll see. And then now we even have like membership, which again is a subscription of sorts. But we're still only, I would say, seeing the tip of the iceberg of the types of models that I've seen work for brands that are where either the tech is completely custom or it's on a platform other than Shopify. So I don't know if there's any piece of that that's worth us jumping into.
No, there is, and I want to dive into that more. And before we and we'll come back. We're going to come back to some stuff too. But I also want to just introduce before we forget, like your newest project, Cruise Control.
Yeah.
Like let's just talk about that really briefly, because anybody's like made it this far, I don't want you to. The more we geek out on tech, maybe we'll lose you. But because I think Cruise Control is like really, really incredible. Like the experience you're enabling with how quickly people can get. I mean, I'll just, as a quick example, we had Thor Kellen from X Endurance on here a couple of months ago talking about how they had to do some custom work where they load membership pricing. Once you're a member, you see different prices on the discount, like it's actually loading different prices. And so in order to see those though, you have to log in. So if they're sending emails or SMS, people have to get logged into the site to actually see the accurate pricing. Otherwise, they're just going to see what anybody else could see. And Cruise Control is simplifying that.
Yeah, no, and I think this goes back to even like, I'd say the arc of an entrepreneur and entrepreneurships in general is like, I'd say like if there was like a common thread to all like this, I think Rodeo is my 8th company, 8th startup. Not every startup has, startups have had different lengths. I think Carthook we did for about 7 years. But I was there day to day for about 4. The common theme for me is I'm like a systems and automation nerd. Like I just love making things more efficient and like figuring out how to eliminate unnecessary steps. Like I've had an EA for 11 years. Like I do everything I possibly can not to do anything in my personal life. Like I just like things happening and I don't like having to get involved. I just like, for me, it's like I love doing the thing. I hate planning the thing, which every girlfriend has loved, has not loved. I try to say it's not that I don't care. It's just it stresses me out. Like the planning thing. I'm good company. I'm not good at scheduling these things, but I digress. So like for me, a lot of like even the interest around subscriptions, the subscriptions are a great way of a brand increasing LTV, increasing contribution margin. Like there's all these, and at this point I won't like go into all the different like acronyms that subscriptions push because we all know it. I think there are substantial downsides to subscriptions, in part because they're it's so saturated, and it became so saturated because the model actually became really popular because it's really powerful, this concept of compounding revenue. And it's funny because we saw that in software where like especially like Photoshop was one of the first ones, or Adobe, of like, I think we first saw subscriptions around like personal entertainment products like Netflix. Then we saw Adobe and like B2B products start doing it. And then e-commerce, I think around the time of like the Boxy Charms, whereas like the Build a Box or the Box of the Month were sampling, they lent it. But like CPG and physical products have like some unique challenges around subscriptions that software products don't, largely around getting too much product. So at any rate, when we launched Rodeo, the subscription product, there was like an enormous need. And I would say like, I consider like a broken system around the tools that entrepreneurs had, specifically to scale their, like the subscription model in the mid-market. So brands that were around like 2 million ARR scaling to, 10 and beyond. Without getting into like the nuance of that, I think a lot of those the areas, the space has matured a lot in the last 18 months or 2.5 years since we first launched it. And so the new product that you mentioned was sort of came out of a recognition of, subscriptions and sort of the opportunity around like D2C, in my opinion, as an entrepreneur has changed on like the vendor software side. There's an enormous number of products now that you can use around subscriptions. Which I'm sure anyone listening to this can attest. It's like, there's like 23 apps. Some of them like and at a certain level, you can use any one of them, where it becomes more nuances around specific use cases. But what I noticed in working with a lot of these subscription brands, and this is the transition here is into cruise control, was brands were investing a lot of money in top of the funnel de-anonymizing traffic. So you see like tools like retention.com, you see lots of retargeting, you see all the changes that happen with iOS and tracking. And then coming up is like iOS 17 with UTM parameters now are going to be stripped out of emails when you click it. So what's happened is brands are investing a lot of money, and retention's become increasingly important, and business models like subscriptions are critical to companies scaling. On the flip side, what you'll see is that with all the email marketing and segmentation that happens, the weird thing is that when a shopper clicks a link within an email, the traffic that, like, once they click it, they basically are anonymous again on the site. Like everyone on the site, like unless you're sending someone to a specific landing page, the site experience is the same. And as you mentioned, like one use case is like, let's say you're using loyalty points and you're trying to basically get someone to come back and let's say like spend a store credit before it expires. Typically what happens is like the person has to like log into an account, create an account, remember their password, and it creates friction that
go back to the offer page, try to find the offer page again that they were on. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, it's stupid. It's an enormous amount of friction for something that should be easy for the customer. The consumer doesn't really care. They were interested enough to just click your link. And as an entrepreneur or as a brand rather, ultimately you're investing all this money to do like sort of sophisticated segmentation at the top of your funnel, but you're losing a lot of the visibility into the data and into your traffic once they come from your marketing. Right. And so with cruise control, what we do is a couple of things. One of which is when someone clicks a link in their email or SMS, we automatically log the shopper into their account with the brand. And if they don't have an account with the brand, we can actually dynamically create one so that they're logged in and they don't have to like manually create like a username and password. The benefit of that is that the other tools in your app stack are aware of who the shopper is, right. Like at least their email address. And that makes it so that the shopper doesn't have to like self-identify who they are. Right. Oftentimes
so you're not going to see the pop-up. You're not going to see the pop-up a first-time site visitor sees 10% to get your email. We literally just emailed you and you click the link to come to the site. Like that's another thing that I was kind of like, it's like, instead it should be a relevant offer. Hey, thanks for coming back. We have a special offer just for you. We know your LTV numbers are because we've like you're saying, so like you segmented them already. We had Jimmy Kim from Sendlane on here not too long ago, and he's trying to harp on the fact that you need to be segmenting users into people that are buying and understanding who their value and all those things. If you're going to market to subscribers and you're coming back and you're trying to show them a new offer and you'd like to add that to their subscription, right? Like being able to be logged in, the site knows who they are. You can engage in a totally different way in an offer that is relevant instead of just treating everybody the same.
Well, and I think part of that too is by knowing whether or not, for example, like we're basically enabling the brand to access, or we're letting the marketer access all the data that the store already has about each shopper. And in some cases, the brand doesn't know anything about the shopper except for their email address, because they were on their list. So they did since they emailed them directly, they did opt into them. We're not talking about we're not talking about like publishers retargeting cookies and all that stuff. We are talking about people that you already have some sort of relationship with. And then you have data around like, have they spent money as like an a la carte buyer? Have they subscribed or not? And so theoretically what you can do is you can present someone with an offer that is sort of the next intermediate step in your relationship. So if they've purchased from you before, but they're not a subscriber, you could present them with an offer to subscribe.
That's what I was just
thinking. If they've never purchased from you before, then it's just to make their first purchase. And you could even, and if they've purchased your hero product, you could even position like a bundle with like a complementary product as opposed to trying to sell your hero product again. So there's a lot of data that you as a marketer should have access to because you've already collected all this data. But there's no way for you to sort of personalize the store experience and then eliminate steps in the funnel based off of what you know about each person. Like, and the last example I'll give before like sort of being the dead horse is like pre-populating their email at checkout. Like similar, like if someone's coming back through your email marketing, you know their email address. Now, the person should be able to change their email address if they want, but like you should at least pre-populate it. And that goes back to, I'd say, like my background in design, which is like one of the core tenets. Like there's a great book called Don't Make Me Think, which is really about the way to create great experiences is in not requiring someone to have to think. And the way that, at least in the products that I've built, the way that I tend to approach that is through like pre-populating answers based off what you know, and then make it easy for the person to change it if it's not right. But like this idea that it's much easier to edit as opposed to create is true. And like we all are making so many decisions that, and again, so I think if you're a brand, like one of the things I would take a look at is what are situations or instances where you could sort of suggest a next step that is somewhat tailored to who the person is, as opposed to like presenting someone with 10 options. It's like, you probably know enough to make sort of an informed decision. And oftentimes just nudging them or pre-selecting something is enough, because people will go with the recommendation 9 times out of 10.
Right. That's the power of upsells, right? Like you have a little bit of control, like, and that's sometimes why I harp a little bit on like dynamic upsells versus like, you just kind of know, you know what goes well with your hero products. So just suggest the complementary products. Yeah. Okay. No, that's really, really cool. I think, so yeah, I'll put a link to that in the show notes, to Ben's website for Cruise Control. For anybody listening or reading, will be able to check that out. I want to kind of go back to the subscription app stuff, because it's interesting. I think a question we talk about all the time, and anybody listening trying to figure this out, there's so many different things, so many different apps out there. There's so many different practices out there. I think I was just telling you offline, I had a post today where like talking about tech stack stuff, and if you're a brand trying to figure out like, should I be going after one of these newer apps, or should I be switching off Recharge? Or, I was asked recently, somebody on Recharge, whether they should go to Order Groove or Skio or Stay, I think is who they were evaluating, like those types of options and stuff. So do you get asked that a lot about which subscription apps people should pick? I'd love to get your take about like when you were running Rodeo, you said you were one of the first native brands. Like I'd certainly love to pivot into that, like what you think about that landscape and what's going on with so many different app offerings on Shopify.
Yeah. I mean, so like the analogy I'd give is like, if you think about emails and ESPs, like you mentioned Klaviyo, and I think you also mentioned SendLane on this conversation. It's like, and this is actually an interesting conversation I have with a lot of D2C founders. Because I am an engineer, I do, to answer your question, I do get this question a lot, not just around your subscription tech, but like your entire tech stack. Even as much as like, should I go headless? Should I do composable? Should I go on Shopify? Should I, do fully custom? And, the like sort of annoying answer is it depends, right?
Yep.
It's both. It's not, and then that me saying it depends is not me like deflecting from giving like a,
no, it's like, but it's the truth, right? Like you can't just like, okay, well, I need to know a little bit more about your business and what's motivating.
Right.
Like, does site speed really matter for your conversion rate? Like in general, it does, but does it matter for your business? Because then otherwise, like, why are you worried about going headless? Like,
right. And I think with most things, it comes down to like sequencing also. Like, so conversion rate's a great example. It's like, is your biggest issue actually conversion rate, or is it that you're not getting enough traffic? Or you're getting traffic, but you're not converting it. And it has nothing to do with you optimizing the conversion. It has nothing to do with you optimizing site speed. It's the fact that no one wants your offer. Right. So like a lot of this really comes down to sort of discerning, like, what is your actual situation? What are all the variables that you could manipulate? And then what are the ones that are actually going to like have the most impact, given your current stage and what you have for resources. So in terms of like going back to the Klaviyo and SendLane example, like you could use either one of them. Like I know the reasons why people switch. This happened a lot actually in like the earlier days of Attentive versus Klaviyo. Like people would ask me, like, do you think I should use Klaviyo or kind of Attentive? And I'd be like, by and large, like you could do either one. Attentive has annual contracts. It tends to be like, it's certainly more enterprisey, so that there are some like things that come with that are maybe like better suited for your business if you want like more like on hands customer support. I think at the time, this is not as true now. But at the time, there was a moment where you could not, like, if you wanted to do anything around incorporating your own merge tags into emails that were not just like out of the box merge tags created by the ESP, you could not use Attentive. So for example, like in one of my earlier products, One Click Pony, we were incorporating a specific sort of token into merge tags. We couldn't do that through Attentive's APIs. We could not incorporate a custom property that could be then incorporated as a merge tag. So in that case, if you were a brand that was working with us, you could not use Attentive, right? Like, so there are certain circumstances where like it does matter. And, so oftentimes the question with brands is like, okay, are you trying to do this? Are you trying to do this? If you want to work with us, you can't use Attentive right now.
I had the director of retention at a fairly large subscription brand on Recharge that was thinking about migrating to SendLane off of Klaviyo and stopped because basically they knew that Klaviyo would be prioritizing Recharge and all of their feature updates, right?
Yeah.
Or that Recharge, I should say Recharge was prioritizing Klaviyo and all of their feature updates. SendLane was a distant like afterthought. And so if you were highly reliant on a Recharge Klaviyo integration, depending on, and again, for a lot of brands, they actually don't. All they're doing is it's triggering an upcoming order email. It's triggering like maybe an onboarding campaign. But if you're starting to use like a little bit of the more sophisticated, like triggering actions and how you're timing things, and like that can matter. That can make a difference, right? Like, and so those use cases like make sense to me. But the thing is like we live in a world now where, based off of a tweet or off of a podcast or something, like people are picking subscription app software. And a lot of times my questions come back to like, well, what's your use case? Like, do you know what's the most important thing to your subscribers, right? Like a brand that like, a really great brand on Loop subscriptions, Lilac Street, they're using like progressive pricing. Like the more people buy, the better price they get, right? Well, that's not super easy to implement on some of these different subscription apps, but that's something that Loop happens to do pretty well, right? So it matters. Like if they were to leave, and they know that is what's triggering like the highest rate of conversion for them to get subscribers, that's the most important thing. But there's retention, all these other retention tools and stuff. And I think too, like, and I guess this is me maybe pontificating a little too much, but is that the problem is you get sold on retention tools, but 9 times out of 10, the issue with the subscription experience is actually just like you either don't have enough traffic, you haven't worked on your offer, or you don't understand what people value the most about your subscription. And has little to nothing to do with the app that you're using. It has everything to do with your marketing and your branding department.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's absolutely right. And I think one of the funny things, and I'll put back on my like grandfather hat of old man Shopify circa 2015, 18, whatever the 2000 was. So like the first generation, what I'd consider the first generation of apps were really created by programmers who weren't marketers. We weren't good marketers. Like the App Store in particular was so powerful because there was like a lot of natural growth through discoverability. That is a lot less true today. It's also not how the App Store is not how larger merchants tend to make decisions anyways. But the current like sort of wave of tools are really good at marketing. Like it's some of the best marketing, like some of the best SaaS marketing I've seen in a really long time.
Yeah.
Which as an engineer is really challenging. Yeah. Like, and I've tried to step up and I would say like improve at marketing. Like I would consider myself like a consultative sales kind of entrepreneur where it's like, I like getting really deep into problems. Right. I'm not a growth marketer. What I really enjoy doing is more one-on-one, which also is better suited for working with larger brands because, I can't go deep with like a bunch, like even from a financial perspective, I just can't go deep and build a good business by going deep with 1,000 1,000 entrepreneurs. Right. I'd like to, but like at least in terms of the early days of understanding the business, like it just makes sense to be like higher mid-market. But what I was gonna say is like a lot of the deals that we would lose with the subscription app, this wasn't true initially. Then it became increasingly true. It's like it became like a feature war where people just kept adding features, right? And what was fascinating to me, and drove me insane, was that like a lot of the features that like a prospect would show up to a demo, and they'd come sort of with a laundry list of here are all the features that your competitors have, like A/B testing, win back, like free gift with X purchase, like a bunch of different things, and they would be like, they basically go through and be like, which ones do you have, which ones do you not have, like, and let's say there's like 25 features, right. My question was always like, well, tell me about your business. Which of these features are you currently using? And inevitably what would happen is they're not using really any of them. It's more they could imagine using them. And, exactly. Part of what I tell them around A/B testing is like, unless you have like stat significance, it doesn't matter. And not only that, you're doing A/B testing possibly within like, let's say it's within your upcoming order reminders. You're not getting, and let's say it's for the third upcoming order, you're not getting that many people into your funnel at that point anyways. You're better off focusing further up into like the subscription experience. Right. And like, you don't want to just pick a tool because it has that one feature that you hypothetically might use. And I will tell you this, I don't know a single entrepreneur who has gone deep into using any of these features. For a lot of them, they are still on their wish list of, I will use it at some point when it becomes a priority. And this is like a year later, right? Right. Because I will circle back with some of these brands to just understand like, hey, how did it go? Like, because I like understanding, like, are you happy with your decision? Like, is there anything that I can learn to like improve our product? And like, and out of just curiosity of understanding the market, especially now that we're not in this, like we're, focused on cruise control. I'm also just like, when I make recommendations to people, I'm also just trying to understand where the market is. Yeah, a lot of these features people don't use. And not only that, my favorite feature that is useless is the gift instead of skip. It is possibly the most ridiculous feature I have ever seen in my entire life. And I say this, like, I want everyone to keep an open mind for a second. Like, just think as a consumer. Let's say you are subscribed to a anti-bloat supplement, for example. I'm just making this up. Like, I'm just trying to think of something like a consumable. Sure. And it's like, you have too much of it or you're going to be out of town. And so you just want to skip it. You're presented with an option that says, would you like to gift this to a friend instead, rather than skipping it? It's $30 a month. I'm like, I don't know which friend of mine wants a bloat supplement, right? Like, not only that, it's like, it's $30. I'd rather like, is this like a birthday present? Like,
yeah. Like, and let's unpack that further. Like, let's keep in mind, like, the idea is the brand, and this is one of my also pet peeves, is the SaaS is building a feature that they think the brand will want because the brand wants to try to capture as much subscription revenue as possible.
Yes.
Instead of thinking through the use case. So the I have too much product use case, comes from, I'm not using it enough, or I just haven't ordered the right amount. And so the actions, if you present actions that aren't actually going to make a difference, if you're not presenting the, let's get you on the right frequency action, or, hey, we're happy to skip, but like, how much do you have? So let's skip you out the amount that you need to use it. Right.
Yeah.
That's great. If you really want to gift a subscription to somebody, create like a referral or some type of other program, build that as a feature. Right. And then there are some of them that do that, where it's like, okay, this is really cool. I would like to share it with my friends. So I'm going to go get a free order from my friend, or I'm going to give my friend a coupon that they can use to redeem to get a free subscription order. And then I get loyalty points or whatever. So no, I remember you mentioned that one.
Yeah. Like, I have several friends who are like the heads of growth for like large subscription brands. And like, that was the one that just kept coming up when they were like, they would like, I feel like I'd do therapy calls with a few of my friends, and they're just like talking about, and like, that's the feature. They're always like, I got pitched on this. This is insane. Like, so yeah.
Well, just getting this. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Finish it.
I was going to say, I'm curious if anyone listening to this has gifted instead of skipped. Please contact Matthew and me, and I will happily eat my sock. But it has, or if you're a brand where it is actually resulting in like a considerable amount of revenue. I'm trying to keep an open mind. Like I don't believe it, but I will be open to you presenting me with like counterfactual evidence.
Okay, so let's so we've been poking a little bit of holes in the whole like the feature war idea and stuff where and again, my whole mantra from the beginning of subscription prescription is all about like understand the software you have, understand the business you have, how to use that more. Like again, most of the time when somebody's not to say I'm like coming to Recharge's defense here or anything, but like a lot of times people are like, oh, we're thinking about leaving Recharge. Well, why? Well, we've just seen some other cool things out there. Well, have you tried doing that with Recharge? And the answer is often no. Because the interesting part is there's often that feature already exists. You just don't know it because Recharge does so much. They've been around so long and the platform sometimes can be hard to navigate or find out. Or like you don't realize that actually a half decent developer could just customize that for you in just a couple hours worth of work. But again, for me, it's often like, well, we could go down a whole nother rabbit hole. But what I really want to get into is because I do think that there are great apps. They're doing great things. Like I'm not like I think that it's amazing. I love the competition. I love what they're innovating. I love the fact that subscription portals are just way nicer now than they have used to be. But what I'd love to get your opinion on is how, like, what should someone be focusing on? So we've talked about like all these extra features you don't need to worry about. Brands have too many things that they're focusing on. Anybody listening, if you're from a brand, like you already know that you have too many things that you're focusing on. You don't need us to tell you that what's happening. Where do you think the most impactful points inside a subscription journey are for creating high LTV and high contribution margin? Because I'm glad you only mentioned those things, because to me, that is the North Star. Like LTV and contribution margin hand in hand. That's what we're driving for. And there are a lot of different ways to get there. So where do you feel like, and again, this is a generalizer, you can say it depends all you want, but what are some of the like best practices or things that you think that somebody should focus on? Say they're around the $2 to $3 million range getting the subs, or they're a bigger brand that's trying to take subs a little more seriously now.
I have some mental notes, so I'm going to try to compile my thoughts first. Because yes, I'll say it depends, and then I'll qualify with where I think the different like, because I do have like it depends, but here's the situations where it matters, and here's my advice. But before I do that, one other thing I was going to say that an observation of mine has been in talking to a lot of brands who are considering a migration. I think one of the most important things to keep in mind of is like one of the biggest problems is there's all these features that you don't realize are features. So when you're considering any sort of solution, this extends beyond just subscription apps. This is anything, like whether it's Klaviyo, SendLane, whatever. It's like oftentimes what will happen is you're going to be presented by a vendor with, here, you don't have this feature X doesn't exist on legacy platform Y, right? And so you get super excited about that and all these features that they basically like no one else has. The problem or the challenge can be oftentimes is you don't realize like they're not one for one on all the things that you sort of take for granted. So like I know that like I think during the like initial sort of jump from Recharge to a lot of apps, like one thing that I would hear from a lot of founders was like, I jumped over to subscription app X because of X, Y, or Z feature, but what I didn't realize was that they don't have the ability to do like, let's say like delivery windows. I didn't even know that was technically a feature. I just kind of thought that was
standard.
And it's like, well, actually no, like very few brands actually need that. But like even with Rodeo, our subscription app, there were a lot of features that even today most subscription apps don't have, that for certain brands, like they just assume every app has it. Like the progressive discount one that you mentioned,
right? Like
we have that. But we originally had to build that because it didn't exist, and it was first something that was custom built within one person's Recharge build out. Like a lot of subscription apps don't have that, and so if you're a founder and you're using progressive discounts, you probably also even have like some logic around it. You also probably want to have grandfathered pricing for some people. So it's never as simple as just building the feature. It's also like all the use cases. And so like an exercise that I would do is write down, like go through your customers over and your support tickets over the last 90 days, and go through and write down like what are the features that people are using, what are the actions people are taking, and sort of create a catalog of like the sort of the surface area of your product experience that is being used, and sort of use that and then say like, here's how I would describe that if it was a feature. And when you're talking or considering like exploring new vendors, take that list and present it to the vendor and say, read this over. These are the things that customers are doing. Can we do all of this? And if not, like, and let me know like the sort of the boundaries of what is and is not possible. Because oftentimes what will happen is like an app might do part of it, right? Like with a progressive discount, they might do a percentage off, but you can't do like flat rate pricing, right? Like sometimes you might want to have like,
you want it to be 5, 10, 15 pricing instead of, percentage wise, as opposed to like, $20, $30, $40 kind of thing. Yeah. Right.
Another example is like one brand I worked with wanted to use round numbers for all of their pricing. So they wanted to use a percentage, but they also wanted the number to be sometimes they wanted it to be like a set amount. So it wouldn't be like $18.35. It would be $19 or $17, right? And so like you have these examples where like from a marketing perspective, the marketer wants more control over the language, but like you don't think of that when you're doing the migration. And it's not, and so that's one example. And that's something where I've seen it go painfully bad for brands because they don't realize what is and is not a feature necessarily. And neither the vendor nor the subscription or nor the brand kind of know to point that out. So just be very careful around that and thorough.
Okay. Coming back, cause we're coming up.
Yeah.
No, actually we're a little okay on time. I usually, I do want to hear from what are some of the, like, you feel like are the best practices,
right?
Where should a brand that is trying to build a subscription business, what should they be focusing on or how should they be thinking about instead of just getting into a feature mindset?
So, I mean, I think there's certain features that are disproportionately impactful on contribution margin and LTV. And depending on the size of the business, like the number you had said was 2 million ARR. So I think one of the first things I look at is what's the percentage of people who renew after the initial purchase. I look at how many people cancel the same day as their initial subscription purchase, because that will give you indicators around like, are they just subscribing for the discount? Maybe your discount's too high, and so you're actually cannibalizing your margins by getting a lot of people into your subscription program, where in fact they would be buying it a la carte otherwise. Like some of what we've even seen in our own analysis, because we built a bunch of diagnostic tools when working with subscription brands. One of those was looking at of your healthiest subscribers, what was their journey? And what we found was most subscribers who had the highest LTV started off as a la carte buyers who, again, depending on the brand, like there was one brand where what we found is on average, a great subscriber would start off buying like a la carte, and then they would convert between their second and third a la carte purchase to subscription. And that LTV was dramatically better than other subscribers who like subscribe from day one. But we also found that there are also a lot of this is what it was. Sorry. 99% of people who convert to a subscription from a la carte did it within the first 3 purchases. Literally less than 1% ever subscribed or converted to subscription after the 3rd purchase. And so one of the insights there was stop pushing people to convert to subscription after their 3rd one-time purchase, because they're not going to do it. What you're better off doing is doing bundling or selling, like trying to get them to do like a sample another one of your SKUs
or something like that, or try something different. Yeah, there's a lot of different.
Which actually goes back to some like the cruise control stuff, where it's like, if you know whether or not someone's a subscriber, you know how many times they've purchased, you can modify or personalize the offer based off of like where they are in their life cycle. So if they've purchased 4 times and they're not a subscriber, don't have your offer be to get them to subscribe. Focus on driving another a la carte purchase, because that is what they're going to do. So in terms of like the high margin and high LTV behaviors, that's one of them. Just looking at like where are you, like where should you be focusing at like the top of the subscriber journey. Another one that is like a high ROI, I'll call it like recipe, is it was originally introduced through like Get ARPU, which is still a integration for Recharge, which what it enabled you to do is to, when someone received an upcoming order reminder, it made it easy for you to add items to your upcoming order reminder with a single click, without having to like request a one-time passcode and all that stuff. Like that is a huge high value behavior that comes up for every single subscriber who's going to renew every single time. So like that's an example of high leverage, because it's going to happen to every single person every single time if they're a subscriber, versus things that, let's say, that are only introduced further into the subscription journey. The incorporation of like SMS and checking in to get like soliciting feedback and training the customer to use your product as a ritual is an important one that we've seen a lot of.
That's one that I harp on a lot too. Yeah. No, I just say I love hearing you that, because I mean, at the same time, a lot of brands are nervous about that, because they're like, you know, if I send an email or if I send a text message, I'm going to get a bunch of cancellations. But at the same time, like if you have a product that's consumed consistently or regularly, or it has a habit around it, you know, like you want to remind somebody to use it. Like if you're selling like a fancy little flossing or a new type of like flavored floss, like you want to make sure they're using your floss, or, you know, not a different floss, right? And so it's oftentimes, at least very early on, you want to remind people, hey, here you go, so that, you know, they become a lifelong fancy flosser or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, 100%. Another feature that no one does, we were building it ourselves at Rodeo, but no one's done it. So this is like I've seen it done custom before, but it's the actually, let me take a step back. There's two features that brands, depending on their business model and depending on their product, should do. One of which is upgrading monthly subscriptions into annual subscriptions as a post-purchase upsell. That was a feature that we had built out, where if someone buys a monthly subscription, they've already committed to that. Do a prepaid annual, right? That's free margin. If you're able to ship all the product together, like if it's a light product, you can't do this with drinks because they're just so heavy generally. But like if you have like a light product, you could even do like a one-time annual shipment. That is enormously helpful. Similar
even
to
if you were
that,
to break it in a quarterly or semi-annual.
Yeah.
And again, keep in mind, everybody, like instead of 12 monthly orders and you're getting your money back month after month, you're getting 12 months of revenue, or maybe you discount it even more to 10 or 11. You're getting that all at once that you can put back into marketing spend and go after more customers.
Yeah. The other strategy that, and this is the one I was saying, I haven't seen any apps do out of the box, but they should, because it's a really effective strategy that my buddy Eric had told me about that he's done with several brands, is an in-cycle upgrade, where what you do is if someone subscribes to a monthly subscription, let's say it's 14 days into their subscription, what you do is you present them with an offer to upgrade their subscription into an annual. And the reason why this is important is you're not waiting all the way. They're still sort of at the height of their usage of your product. They already know that they like it, presumably. And they, you know, it's not like so far into the subscription relationship that they're no longer excited. And so, but very few, I'm not aware of any apps that do this out of the box. I think you can custom build it with Recharge. If anyone knows of this being possible on a subscription app, please let me know. I have not seen it, but yeah, we called it an in-cycle upgrade. And again, from a way to sort of push forward revenue, it's really effective, because again, like one of the biggest issues around subscriptions is someone doesn't want to subscribe or commit to something until they really know they like the product. And so this is something that you can present to every single person who does a monthly subscription, and you'll present it to the first person, or within the first cycle of a person subscribing. So it has, when it works, it has a disproportionate impact on your cash.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really insightful. I hadn't quite thought of them that way before. I mean, and the funny thing is that I've seen some brands that are selling prepaid annual subscriptions up front. And those obviously, those sometimes have lower take rates or conversion rates than other things. But then again, you never know. No,
and that's why you should follow up with the upsell. Because again, like part of the problem in general of trying to get someone to buy an annual before they've purchased your product is that's a big ask.
It's a big commitment. Yeah.
Right.
It's a big dollar price. Yep.
Yeah. Reduce the risk. And also you're not going to, one of the risks too of like the bigger ask is you potentially lose the entire sale. Someone might not accept it, which is why post-purchase upsells are a better strategy. Right. Often, not always, than pre-purchase, because you don't want to get in the way of the behavior of the initial purchase that someone's going to make. Yeah, I mean, like those are, I mean, we could probably go on forever around like different strategies. Like those are the ones that I think there's still like a lot of brands aren't doing it. And they have a huge impact on margin because we're talking about like 12 months. I'm trying to think of anything else that comes to mind. I mean, like an easy to use portal where like everything's not cloaked. I think when you can avoid passwords, like please, like as a consumer, I just want to be able to do stuff. I don't want to negotiate with you.
I would say, okay. Yeah.
I was going to say, and please send upcoming order reminders. Please don't be a brand that is hiding, because ultimately
put a little effort into customer experience, right? Like it doesn't need to be like, hey, click here to cancel your order. Like it can literally be like, hey, you're trying to fight stomach bloating. Don't forget, this is the best tool to like help you feel like win back your life. If you have too much product or want to, click here to make a change. And by the way, here's all the other stuff we sell that you can add to your order that's going to make your life better. Invest a little bit in that email for sure. And then there's something you said earlier, like as kind of like a wrapping thought or like a final thought. The whole point sometimes, I think, where the disconnect is a brand or just as human beings, we get a little bit obsessed with the shiny object, and subscriptions are in many ways a shiny object. But the truth is, it's like it's lifetime contribution margin that is the real metric. And so whether that's an amazing loyalty program or memberships or subscriptions, or just you have a phenomenal like email marketing tool, or how Rodeo was working where you're just trying to trigger when somebody wanted to make, when they need a repurchase, like to me, that should be the ideal. So thinking through what does your customer want? How are they using the product? What is more convenient for them? And can you build an experience that's like not too expensive or that will have a better ROI for you, right? Like seeing some brands where they're shifting to like, instead of doing a monthly subscription, you're doing it quarterly and you're sending them 3 months worth of shipments, and you're willing to give a bigger discount because you can save on shipping to do that. And you get all that money all that money at once instead of month over month. So there's a lot of factors there, but sometimes customers really like that. And so they're willing to buy the quarterly because it's better and they get it all and they don't have to worry about it. So like any final thoughts on that about like how you approach the problem of, building out the right experience to unlock contribution margin, lifetime contribution or repeat contribution margin from your customers, instead of just thinking like, we're going to build a SaaS-based business because we're going to have recurring revenue from subscriptions?
I mean, I think you kind of hit on all the major things, which is...
Okay, we'll wrap up then. We don't have to say anything. No, I'm just
kidding. Which is like, think it through from the perspective of a consumer. And I think, certainly one challenge I've had, especially with my background in design, like when we were first working on Rodeo, I think the way I even positioned it to our investors was a consumer-centric approach towards subscriptions, which, I'd say this has always just been a philosophy of mine. It certainly was for us at CartHook. It is, I think, with most of the products that I've built in my career, it's like, I personally believe that you build a great product and build a great brand in part by creating a great experience, which is very non-controversial. No one's going to disagree with that. But I think where it becomes a bit controversial is when you start, and I saw this when talking to brands around this like model around like not locking people into subscriptions necessarily if it wasn't the right thing for the consumer. Like a lot of brands position themselves or say that they're consumer centric, but when you start talking about like communicating about an upcoming order reminder, they're like, oh no, we don't want to do that because our revenue might go down. It's like, that's not consumer centric. Like, how consumer centric are you really? And I think that the truth is it depends, right? And like as a startup, you're often focused on survival, which is a challenging piece for a brand, because I think the best brands, like you need to find a way to create a great enduring value. And like great brands aren't hiding behind subscription renewal reminders. They're the ones who, like, I would argue, are perhaps overly communicative around like the upcoming order reminder. And part of what they're finding out is like they're able to see, do people value their product enough not to cancel? And if they cancel, that's really good data. They're like, shit, we need to go back to the drawing board, or we have a lot of work still left to do. They're not hiding behind the communication.
Well, Recharge's annual subscription report was saying that like at enterprise level brands, the AOV is actually smaller and the frequency is actually less. So they're doing cheaper amounts, less frequently. But I bet their LTV and what else they're selling them into are higher, because they're just trying to get somebody to get what they want, and they just keep getting that on for years and years and years. Because most brands are turning over a subscriber base every 4 or 5 months. Like some are going out a little bit farther than that, but it's really like maybe 7 months. Most of them are turning that over completely, or you get 10 or 20% of your subscribers that make it to a month, to a year.
And I imagine, a piece of that's economies of scale, where they can afford to have lower prices in the same way that Amazon can. And I was going to say, one thought I just want to present is like going back to like, what are the incentives that your customers actually care about? I think as an industry, we sort of default to 20% off for subscriptions. I think the thing to pay attention is that, like, does anyone know how much, like when you do Amazon Subscribe and Save, and Amazon obviously is known for having crazy low prices.
5, 10, 15%.
Yeah, it's generally 3 to 5%. What they'll do is they will give you a higher discount for a longer subscription commitment. But again, it tops out generally around 10%. The typical, unless you do a bundle and like some other thing. Yeah. But like the typical Subscribe and Save, especially for a 1-month subscription, it's 3 to 5%. Right? They're not doing, it's really framed around convenience as opposed to around price.
Literally took the word out of my mouth. And so that's the thing, is like, you have to understand, why are people buying? Is it convenience? Is it price? Or is there some other value that like there's a level of quality or something else that can't be found somewhere else? And if you don't know which one people are buying, and the thing that gets me sometimes is products that are very convenience oriented. Those are the ones where it's like 100% you should be over communicating all the time. Like that people want to know. It's all about convenience. This is going to arrive when I need it. That's a great point. Thinking about that. Ben, my friend, are we? How are your eyes doing now that we've made it to the end and staring at the screen? But
I think I still need glasses. My eyes have not improved, but I can still see you. So I think I'm doing okay. I'm not that old yet.
Good. Well, I really appreciate it. And again, for any of you out there who have technical questions about Shopify, about any apps, really, about subscription apps, and specifically want to learn more about Cruise Control, check out I'll have a link to Ben's LinkedIn as well as Cruise Control in the show notes. But he's just one of those guys in the ecosystem that just is always willing to help and answer questions and help people figure things out, which is why we're friends and why I'm glad you came on the show. So thanks a lot.
I appreciate you having me, man. Thank you so much. Absolutely. And as you said, happy to talk to anyone. I'm not here to pitch. I'm here to learn and trade notes. And so, get in touch if you have any questions.
Great. And that's it for this week's dose of Subscription Prescription. Please stay tuned for next Tuesday when you'll get more.
Okay, and again, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for this week's dose, Upzello. If you are looking for a better way to do loyalty, I highly recommend you giving them a look. I'll have a link to their website in the show notes. But again, in this changing world of trying to create better engagement and trying to get more from your customers in a way that works for them, Upzello is building a great loyalty platform for you.
That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe so that you can get notified when new episodes come out each week on Tuesdays.